Amazing. Can everybody hear me all right? Great to see everyone. Welcome to the Oregon Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting. It's Wednesday, March 26th. The time is 1 p.m. And super excited to get rolling. Just want to go ahead and first give OBPAC members an opportunity to introduce themselves. I will go first. My name is Andre Lightsey Walker. I am a co-chair of OBPAC, and I am representing an at-large position. And then I'll let folks just sort of popcorn themselves.
I'm Hi, I'm Dave Thompson. I'm also co-chair of OBPAC, and I'm also an at-large member.
Hi, I'm Nolan. I am just a normal member of OBPAC, and I'm very excited by the nice weather.
I'm Mavis Hartz, and I am the industry maybe of the OPEC, and I live in LeGrand, Oregon. So I'm also the Eastern Oregon link.
Thank you, Mavis. I believe Emma's with us. Emma, if you could introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, Emma Newman. I'm in Springfield, Oregon, down here in the southern part of the Willamette Valley, and enjoying the warm. Non-voting member on OBPAC.
Awesome, thank you. I did want to confirm that we may have a couple of absences. Is that correct?
That is correct. It looks like Beth will be on the road. She may not join us. Just wanted to double check if Carrie is here, Kathy, or Dell, if you would turn on your cameras.
All right. Well then, I'm going to move into our welcoming some of our guests just based off of the agenda. So we do have Andrea Durbin from ODOT, Callie Sullivan, Ula Janik, as well as, I guess, Ian, you're not a guest, but you will be presenting, and Leanne Ferguson. So thank you all. Really excited to get into your presentations later this afternoon. And then I did quickly just want to go over some of our meeting goals for today's gathering. So the main goal really is to review the Oregon Communities Path, or OCP, applications. And this will be the first phase of a two-phase process that of OBPAC's interfacing with the OCP program, and super excited to learn sort of more about that, that phasing. We will also be hearing from the division and legislative. We'll be hearing division and legislative updates from ODOT staff. We will hear from OBPAC members on their work on other advisory committees, serving as OBPAC members. And we will also be continuing something I'm really excited about, which is a new tradition of hearing from our members, sort of as a part of our OBPAC Meet Your Team. And so I believe Beth is our representative today, but we may have to do some shuffling if necessary. And then lastly, we will be talking a little bit about our in-person meeting that is slated for July to be hosted in Bend. So super excited. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Roberto for our meeting etiquette.
Wonderful. Thank you, Co-Chair Andre. For the records, Dell was able to join us, so he is with us. That brings us with enough members for quorum. So we will
Great.
note that, and I will go ahead and share my screen here. So wanted to just welcome folks if this is your first time attending an OPAC meeting, first time you've seen Zoom. please note that you have some features that you can utilize. Folks who are doing testimony today or wish to do testimony, there will be a section in the agenda where you're able to do that. We're limiting 3 minutes per person for any testimony if they wish to address the OBPAC folks. Please add your name into the chat room or raise your hand once we get to that agenda item so that we are aware that you're providing testimony. Folks who have their cameras on, just for bandwidth, we're asking folks if they could turn off their cameras. That'd be wonderful. We are asking for the OBPAC members to have their cameras on. If you do see that your name is not spelled correctly, or you wish to change your computer name or login name into your actual name, you're able to do that as well if you hit the participant button. This is for chat room and also reactions to raise your hand. I think living in this world of like hybrid meetings, everyone should be aware of how to use the Zoom, but just in case, this is just a reminder. OBPAC Code of Conduct. Just a friendly reminder to folks that the committee and committee members of the public are providing public comment, are expected to remain respectful. And another thing is that these meetings are recorded to abide with the Oregon meeting laws. Also, everything in the chat room will be recorded and made public as well.
Thank you.
And as I mentioned, it'll be 1 to 3 minutes for folks to provide testimony. But with that, I will pass it back to you, Andre.
Thank you so much. I guess now I would ask if there's anyone who perhaps didn't sign up but is interested in offering public comment. This would be your opportunity to do so.
All right, I don't see any hands or anything in the chat room. I will note that there were some written testimonies that were provided to the committee. Committee members should have had access to those written testimonies through the Google Drive, and those are also available on the OBPAC website.
Thank you. Wonderful. So with no sort of in-person public comment, I would like to move forward to sort of assess if we'd like to approve our December 2024 meeting minutes. Did any OBPAC members have any comments, questions, concerns, fears? Yes, Emma, please.
One little adjustment. I'm seeing that I was there, I took notes, but I'm not listed as attending the meeting. So I would like to be added on the attendance, please.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other additions? Okay, then I would like to make a motion to approve the December 2024 meeting minutes.
I second that. That's required, right?
Perfect. And then I don't know if I say all those in favor. Perfect. Wow, cool. Ooh. All those opposed? And anyone abstaining? Great. Roberto, were you able to capture those counts on members? I know it can be kind of...
Yeah, absolutely. We have
Awesome.
Mavis, Nolan, Dell, and Dave with thumbs up. And that gives us enough folks to move forward with the approval of the minutes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Then we'll go ahead and move on to our first update, which is the division and legislative updates. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Andrea. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. Welcome. It's great to see the committee here this afternoon. Andrea Durbin, the manager for policy and strategic investments within the Public Transportation Division. We're really happy to have you here today to have an opportunity to provide input, particularly to review the Oregon Community Paths grant projects. So excited for that conversation and discussion later in the meeting. Wanted just to provide a couple of updates. I'll start with staff-related updates. First of all, I wanted to let everyone know that Alan Thompson left ODOT at the end of the year, and I know he regrets not having a chance to say goodbye to all of you. So we are really grateful and thankful that Ula Yannick, who you will meet here around when we get to the Oregon Community Paths agenda item, is on rotation from Region 1 of ODOT to help us cover for, help us kind of respond to this grant solicitation cycle. And then we will do a full recruitment for that position later in the summer. Also, a couple of other updates, staffing updates. We've recently hired Kat Smith to join the Safe Routes to School team as a program coordinator. Kat used to be at Public Transportation Division. She worked as an executive assistant to the division administrator. She left and she came back to ODOT. So we're very happy to have be able to integrate her into the Safe Routes to School team. And in terms of other positions that relate, they're probably, those are kind of the key positions that interact with this committee. But I would also let everyone know that the final manager position within the Public Transportation Division was filled. Melissa Adelman, who's the manager for Program Services team, started a couple of weeks ago. So we're really happy about that. I wanted to share an update. We continue to work on the standardization of our advisory committees. However, progress on that has been slowed a little bit due to a couple things. One, legislative session. It's been very consuming. And the other is we've taken on a new project, which we're fondly referring to Fix the Files, because we have a lot of reorganization that needs to happen from our filing, our online drive system. And so we've kind of prioritizing that. The same person who was project managing our standardization work with the advisory committees is also project managing that. So we've just had some capacity adjustments. So I'll have more, I think, to update this committee on about progress there later this fall. Realistically, we're moving forward with the new filing cleanup reorganization this summer and hope to make some real progress there, and then which will improve efficiencies internally for PTD quite a bit. And then we'll get back more to implementing some of that work. So I just wanted to give everyone an update there. And then lastly, legislative session. I know many of you are tracking it and following it, and the transportation package is a major focal point. We've been really busy responding to legislative requests and preparing our division administrator, Suzanne Carlson, for giving testimony. She's been up before the Joint Committee on Transportation numerous times, and also the Ways and Means Committee and over the last couple of weeks. So a lot of effort has been going into that. It's been really exciting to see the conversation and the attention to transportation issues. And I'm really happy that Kali Sullivan is with us today from our Government Relations Office. She's going to provide kind of a deeper overview of what's happening and be available to answer any questions that you have. So with that, I will turn it to Kali. Thanks for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. Kali Sullivan, Legislative Liaison with the Oregon Department of Transportation. Happy to be here. As Andrea said, it has been a very, very busy session. About over 3,300 bills have been introduced. We identified over 850 that have a nexus with transportation. So we've been tracking all of those pretty closely. Some of you may be tracking that the first major deadline this session was on Friday. So that number of bills we're tracking went down to about 400. So that helps a little bit, and we have a couple more weeks to the next big deadline. Many of our bills that we're looking at are in the Joint Committee on Transportation, which is not subject to the deadline on Friday. So if there's any that you're tracking personally, just know that they are still alive and well. So for the agency, we have a number of priorities. Of course, the main one is the transportation funding package. We have been involved in those conversations, starting with the statewide tour over the summer, the work groups over the interim, and now having conversations with legislators, and especially Joint Committee on Transportation and Subcommittee, Joint Ways and Means Subcommittee on Transportation and Economic Development. I wanted to flag that some of the ways that we've been heavily involved in providing information is the Joint Committee on Transportation invited ODOT to deliver a series of deep dive presentations. Over the last about 7 weeks, we delivered 7 presentations to different topic areas, and I wanted to highlight one of them was on March 10th, and that was on pedestrian facilities. So that might be of particular interest to this group. If anyone would like to watch it, I'm happy to drop a link in the chat to where you can find that. Suzanne Carlson delivered, and we had some other folks come up as well. It was a really great discussion. And so I also wanted to highlight, outside of the funding package, we have 3 agency bills this session that are moving through the process. 2 of them are omnibus bills, which means that we're doing a DMV and a CCD technical changes. And then the third one is on the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program and moving that project forward. So all of those received a public hearing on the Joint Committee on Transportation on February 3rd. If you have any particular interest in those are also on OLIS, and we expect to see those posted for a work session in the coming weeks. So that's really exciting. I also wanted to note that the budget bill for the agency is 5541. That's a Senate bill. And that is going to be separate from the transportation funding package bill itself at the moment. And so if you want to track that one, we had our first round of public hearings on the budget bill in the Joint Committee or the Joint Ways and Means Subcommittee earlier this month. And of course, PTD went up and Suzanne Carlson presented on the division's budget. So if you want to watch it there as well, I'm happy to drop that link as well. And lastly, I wanted to highlight a couple bills that I thought would be of particular interest to you all. So bear with me as I throw some numbers at you and feel free to jump in if you have any questions. The first is Senate Bill 929, and this appropriates general fund to state parks to develop and maintain the Oregon Coast Trail. So this bill did receive a public hearing and had a work session on Monday, and it had an amendment as well. So that one is moving forward. Next is House Bill 3472. That directs ODOT to study e-micromobility devices in the state and do a report back to the legislature. We haven't seen this bill move at all. We're watching it closely, but it hasn't received any hearings, and it's in the Joint Committee on Transportation. Next is House Bill 3626. This is on e-micromobility regulation and standardization and safety in Oregon. We have been serving as a source of information for legislators as they developed this policy. There was an informal work group over the interim that we were a part of as well. So we are looking forward to continuing those conversations. That bill received a public hearing on March 17th. And Amy Joyce, our DMV division administrator, delivered written or verbal testimony on that as well. So if you have interest in seeing where that bill's at, that hearing is online. Next is House Bill 2963, and that directs the Environmental Quality Commission to establish a program for providing rebate vouchers for anyone who qualifies for electric assisted bicycles. That one had a hearing on March 17th. It's in Joint Committee on Transportation. We haven't seen other movement on that one so far. Next is House or Senate Bill 179. This is the recreational immunity bill this session, and it makes permanent and temporary changes to the landowner immunity laws. This has already moved through the Senate chamber and has been referred over to the House. It's in now the House Judiciary Committee, hasn't received any hearings yet. And it did get a -1 amendment in the Senate chamber. And lastly, I want to highlight Senate Bill 471. This bill would have prohibited operating a Class 3 e-bike on a sidewalk, bike lane, or path. This bill was brought forward by Representative or Senator Pruzansky. This bill ended up not moving forward this session, and they announced they wouldn't be moving forward with it. So I know that one's kind of been out in the ether. If you're curious, that one will not be moving forward. That concludes all my updates. Any questions?
Thank you so much for that. I think we would, oh, go ahead.
I just had a question about what the funding bill total was in comparison and what the comparison is to what the governor recommended.
So we presented on, are you talking about 5541, the budget bill that we as an executive branch agency, we present on the governor's recommended budget. So it's not the agency recommended budget. We just presented on what the governor's budget recommendation was and what the breakdown of that looks like. And then the funding package bill, we will see if how similar it looks, and we just don't know at this time.
Okay.
And I was just going to comment and just see if we could get access to those presentations. I think it'd be really helpful.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right. Well, we are ahead of schedule, which is super exciting. But we're going to go ahead and move into our presentation on the Oregon Community Path. So, Ula, please take it away. Thank you.
Hello, Roberto, can you help us out with the slides? And I think Leanne Ferguson is also going to join me on this.
Absolutely. I'll get that in a second here. I do want to welcome also OBPAC members, Kathy and Beth. Welcome. And let me just go ahead and share my screen.
Great. Welcome everyone. Thanks again for having us. We're going to talk about Oregon Community Paths program. I'm going to pull my notes up. My name is Leanne Ferguson. I am the Active Transportation Senior Policy Analyst for the Public Transportation Division, and we want to thank OBPAC members for all of your involvement in the Oregon Community Paths program in the past, present, and future. We also want to thank you for doing some review and giving us some of your thoughts in advance of this meeting so that we can have a good discussion. I want to also note for everybody in the room that we have made a couple of last-minute changes to this program and extended the timeline a little bit to add a phase 1 and a phase 2 of project review. And this meeting is going to encompass phase 1. So we will not be making a recommended project list at the end of this meeting. We're going to give ourselves a little bit more time, which we will talk a little bit more about in this presentation. But since I see a lot of folks who are interested in this program in the audience, I just wanted to say that out loud to OBPAC members and to all of our members. We're going to add a little bit more time, and we'll tell you a little bit more about why. I would like to introduce Ula Yannick, who you all have, she'll say a little bit more about herself in a second, and we will be tag teaming this presentation. Next slide, please.
Oh, thanks, Leanne. Again, my name is Ula Yannick. I am on rotation from Region 1 Policy and Development, technically. I am the team lead for the agreements team over there. I've been in agreements for most of my career at ODOT. I've actually been at ODOT since 2010, so I'm very new to PTD. I've been on rotation since mid-January, technically, so about 2 months now. So I'm new to this program, but I have been at ODOT for a long time, largely in delivery and operations, and then a couple years in geoenvironmental section as well, working on the Portland Harbor project. So I've kind of have a wide experience with ODOT and our processes, but this is new for me. This has been 2 months, and I'm on rotation to help shepherd this solicitation through to award. And so today we're going to be talking about the slide that's up right now is kind of like our agenda overview. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the program, big picture, the funding sources for this cycle, project types, history of the program a little bit. We'll look at an overview of the applications we've received for this solicitation, some of the application review we've done so far. And then, as Leanne mentioned, we'll be talking more about, you know, what we'll be discussing today after our presentation about the OCP and what we'll be bringing to OBPAC in the future. So first, let's talk about, if we could do next slide, please. So first, I want to talk about this cycle of funding for OCP. So this is cycle 3 of the program, and this cycle is federal funding only. So what that means in this case, it's transportation alternatives funds, which are a set aside from the STBG, that's like the Surface Transportation Block Grant. It's formula funding that we get from Federal Highway. And so this type of funding has not been subject to some of the memos we've been seeing coming out from the USDOT in terms of putting a little pause on this review. These type of funds have not been subject to that pretty clearly. So we do feel really confident about going forward and being able to pursue this program as we're planning to. And so that's good news. We're ready to keep going forward. A note I want to make now that will come up later in conversation is because this is federal funding as opposed to state funding, our ability to deliver federal aid projects is governed by a stewardship agreement between ODOT and Federal Highway. And this agreement governs all federal aid local projects. And so you'll be hearing us talking a little bit about ODOT delivery versus certified agency delivery. And that's kind of, when you hear that, it's based on the stewardship agreement that really governs how we manage federal funds. It's to make sure that ODOT is being good stewards of federal funding. So I did also want to mention that because that's going to be probably a big topic of some of our conversations. Past cycles of Oregon Community Paths have included state funding, and future cycles will include state funding. But this cycle today that we're talking about is only federal funding. It's this transportation alternatives. And Leanne's going to talk to us a little bit about the other pots of money on the next slide.
This is a slightly confusing slide, but we've used it a couple of times for the Joint Transportation Committee recently. It's a big overview of all the active transportation funding sources, eligible uses, and programs here at ODOT. The purple box in the middle, off-road facilities, that's our Oregon Community Paths program. You'll see to the left of that are on-road facilities and where the funding can come from that, and our non-infrastructure programs and where the funding can come from that. So focusing on the purple box for right now, there are 3 different funding sources with different colored arrows going into that box. There is a yellow box called Federal Highway Funds, and that's sort of where our transportation alternatives dollars is. They're federal highway funds. The other 2 funding sources that can be used for off-road facilities are the Transportation Operating Fund, sometimes called TOF, which also sometimes people call the lawnmower fund. It's shorthand for gas tax that's not used for vehicles driving on the road. And then our multimodal active transportation fund, which is a combination of some vehicle privilege tax and the bicycle excise tax. So like Ula said, for this round, we're strictly using federal highway funds, transportation alternatives specifically, and some STGB, state transportation block grants. And then in the next round, we will focus more on our multimodal active transportation fund to let some of those state funds build up over time, and we'll have a large enough amount to run a really good call for applications. Next slide, please. And I'll pass it back to Ula.
Yeah, and so I'd sent some of this materials, I think, last week, but just a reminder of kind of what types of projects these funds are going towards. I don't want to read this entire slide, but generally speaking, one of the eligible projects or regional paths are multi-use paths or trails, including bike trails, footpaths that meet this criteria. Looking at connecting to more communities, serving as a connection point for people commuting between communities. It can be made of one segment or connected segments. And then next slide, please. And then the other kind of big eligible project is a critical link. So again, we're looking at multi-use paths, bike trails, footpaths that improve walking and biking access to high need locations, improve walking and biking in areas where no connections exist. So this is just kind of the high level eligible projects that this program is really meant to go towards. Next slide. So in my 2 months here, shepherding this program and the solicitations, I haven't had a lot of time to really dive deep into previous projects. But I did want to give, a high level sense of where this program's been. And so this high level map shows some of the past awarded projects over the last 2 cycles, so 2020 and 2022. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see a couple examples that of past project examples, and hopefully in the when they're able to hire someone more permanently, they'll be able to go out and get more pictures and stories about some of the more projects that this program has funded. But in general, there's been approximately 40 projects out for award. There's about 25 in construction right now, which is a big amount, and about 9 or 10 that are complete. And so I don't have all of that, a lot of great pictures and stories about those right now, because in 2 months I've really been focusing on this solicitation. But I am working, one of my jobs though is to make sure those are still going. So I am still, making sure that some of our background work, invoices are being paid, those things are staying on track. But unfortunately, I don't have as much information I would like to have about all the great projects that this program has gone towards. But I did want to just give you a little idea of where this program has been. So now we could talk about this cycle of applications. So next slide, please. So here's a very high level summary of the cycle 3. We have $61 million federal dollars available for this solicitation. On the right, you'll see the breakdown of the regions, and those are for all projects. And I did get a request. That was a very good point about trying to break that out between how many of each of those regions applications go between construction and project refinement. And so I can share that information in the chat a little bit later. But that region breakdown is for total applications. There's 2 types of applications. There's construction, so things that are ready to go design through construction, and then project refinement applications, which you'll hear me refer to as planning phase projects as well, because the way that we kind of obligate federal funding, that's a planning phase, as opposed to an engineering phase. And so we had 26 construction applications requesting over $100 million. So already that's double what we have available. And then we have 15 planning phase applications for $8 million. And I believe it was determined in the previous OPAC meeting that we'd have a minimum of $6 million of the allocation available for those planning phase projects. So we are closer in alignment in terms of the application requested amount to how much we have available. But then, and then we have our construction applications. And because this is all federal funding, all of these projects will have a 10.27% match requirement. That's a local match requirement. And let's see, I think that's it. So we'll move on to the next slide. And so this will, we want to talk about kind of this first phase of our review. So OPAC developed prioritization criteria, which I also sent with the materials last week, just to kind of remind, and I know there might be some new committee members, and I'm not as familiar with some of the past OPAC meetings, but these guidelines were kind of what I used to set up the review of these projects with a bigger PTD team, where we looked at these criteria. They're scored out. They had a lot of scores of up to a certain number of points for each of these 5 categories, being equity, safety, outreach, project readiness, and the reasonableness, the cost schedule estimate. How reasonable did we kind of think that application was? And so through this process for the construction projects, we looked at the applications, compared them to the OPAC prioritization guidelines, and came up with kind of the top 150% kind of list of the top 18 projects. For our planning phase projects, for project refinement, we did initially do a review of that, but we're actually going to move all of those forward to the phase 2 portion, where we're going to look at those cost estimates and do a slightly deeper dive into the scoping of those. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. And so I just wanted to give you kind of the high-level summary of how we did that first phase of prioritization based on OPAC guidelines. All of my work and when we would talk about with the team of how we were going to look at these was based on past guidance provided by the committee. And so next slide, please.
Ula,
I think Leanne
really
is going to help out here.
One question that came in through the chat was a question if population was considered as part of this review process.
Not, it was not identified as a scoring criteria whenever we worked with OBPAC before, and so it was not. We did not score, or there were no additional prioritization for projects based on how many people they would impact.
Thank you.
Great question. All right, we're back to me. So this is what I was mentioning at the beginning of this presentation, and Andre kind of gave folks a mention when going over the agenda and the goals for today, is that we have moved this process to a two-phased approach. And this is a kind of a quick process improvement that we are implementing due to there was a missed opportunity for an eligibility criteria around deliverability in the application. And what I mean by that is kind of what Ula was talking about before, where our agreement with Federal Highways is that a certified agency needs to deliver federally funded projects. And so we kind of missed a step earlier on in this process where our applicants and ODOT can work together to make sure that budgets and scopes align with that agreement that ODOT would deliver federally funded projects for non-certified agencies. And also we've had some staffing changes over the last couple of months. So we're playing a little bit of catch up and learning as we go on a train that's already moving. The good news is we sort of identified this issue early enough. It's easier to manage before there is a final project list where people are locked into an amount. This gives us some flexibility to be able to really build projects and not have to like reduce the scope to address any financial concerns. We'll have some other options. So the good news is we identified it, and we're shifting our approach and being nimble in that problem solving. And the surprise is that we're extending the timeline, and we were hoping to have a recommended project list sooner, but we're going to punt it out a little bit later. So so the steps that we are going to take for this phase 2 is that staff's going to work with our delivery and operations division to evaluate the project's budget and scopes, and that will lead us towards a final project recommendation list that'll be more accurate. Staff will also work to improve the application and program guidelines so that this can happen more seamlessly in the future for federal funds. Also, we want to staff will reach out to applicants with this new extended timeline to help mitigate any unforeseen consequences that might come from folks not knowing sooner if a project is going to get selected or not. So we're going to take all of that, take all of those steps in our phase 2. Just also note that our next solicitation will likely be in around 2026, and those will likely be state funds, barring any big unforeseen changes that we cannot predict. And so those will be easier to deliver. Next slide, please. So this is the, Ula mentioned a 150% list, and that is kind of shorthand that we use sometimes for where we look at a project list and we look at where the cut line would be based on how much money we have. And for this round, we have around $60 million for our projects. And then we take half of that and we add it on again. And then we actually look deeply at not just that 100% list, but that 150% list, so that we can do additional evaluation on those projects. So this list is in essence our 150% list. It has 18 projects. These all will move on to our phase 2. They are not in any particular order on this slide. They are actually just like the application number listed by application number, but these aren't in any particular order. But these are the ones that we're going to move forward to phase 2 after doing that priority screening from the goals that we heard from OBPAC that Ula showed in the pie chart earlier. So the other thing I want to note here is that I'm spending a little bit more time right now moving these projects into a phase 2 for another additional information gathering. This will allow us to take a little bit more time up front, but it should speed up our IGA and contracting process later on. So hopefully projects will be able to start at about the same time as they would have before. We're just moving the timing around a little bit. The next slide, please.
And then these are all the planning phase ones, so.
Yes, sorry, I was looking at
types.
looking at the chat. Ian, can you keep a look at the chat and let me know if we should
Yeah.
pause and answer any of the questions?
So I'm not sure if this is the right time to say it, but I'll say it now. So the next question is, have agencies indicated if full award or less than full award will impact their ability to deliver the project or impact of adjusted awards?
That will be part of this phase 2 as well, is interacting with the agencies, especially so there will be since for non-certified agencies, ODOT needs to deliver the project, so we need to write it in a way that ODOT can deliver it. So there will be a little bit of a negotiation there, and we should be able to work with the applicant to update requests to make sure that we are or change the scope, just to make sure that we are able to deliver the scope with the amount of money available. The other piece here is that for non-certified agencies, we will allow that. We want to allow that same process. So like if a non-certified agency thinks that, oh, actually we would need a little bit more money here, or we want to reduce the scope.
Yes.
Oh, oh yeah, I'm sorry. So did not. I'm getting my words all mixed up. For certified agencies, yes, correct. We want to offer the same additional step to be able to adjust requests amounts after some additional study on, or just additional scoping for projects.
And just
Great
to add a little
question.
bit onto that, this does help kind of mitigate some of the hiccups we've had in the past with other federal aid projects, where this step would have been taken once there's award already happened and we're working through the IGA process, and then kind of looking at it and saying, oh, maybe we don't have quite enough federal dollars in this. We're actually doing that now, so that way we can adjust any requested amount or funding amount that we might want to award to a given project now. And that way we don't have to do this later where we're hampered into an already selected projects and everything. So so hopefully this will mitigate some issues we have after award in some of these federal local agency projects. So so we will be working with them on some of that discussion as well. Thanks.
And then the last question is there an opportunity to advance other projects not on this list based on discussion and review from OBPAC? I believe the list being the 150% list.
Oh,
yeah.
There's oh, I took that question to mean the 8 that aren't on this list, because there's 26 total applications and we've moved about 150% plus-ish list forward. I think that question is going to the other 6 or 8. Is that correct?
Yeah, it would be if we suggest moving other applicants up and some that are on this 150 list down. Can we do that? Yeah, because I want to
Can we add that
discussion.
as a discussion item for this for later?
Yeah,
because I don't want to say yes or no right now. So. Any other questions on this, or should we move on to the next slide? Can you go back one, Roberto? One slide back, Roberto? Thanks, Jessica was asking to see this. And I think this will be posted also later, so.
Yeah, well, our apologies. Well, this when this probably as soon as this meeting wraps up, we'll be able to post it in the meeting materials.
Mhm.
This may be redundant and I apologize, but I think just for some of our guest audience members, if we could just have a sort of re-clarification of the 150% list, like what, just a definition of that for folks in the room.
So the way we came up with this is, and I want to say 150%, maybe a little bit plus, because actually for construction projects, we have about 54 million available. And so we went up to about 75 million of that total amount requested that we have showing is about 75, 76, I think. That way it gives us the yeah.
Of like we don't review projects up and we want to review more projects than the amount of money that we have in order to have some flexibility. If yeah, in order to have a lot of information about more projects.
Totally great, and I appreciate that, and I think it's a great model as well. Just making sure folks in the room are clear about that.
Yeah. That's pretty across the board for for grant programs. Usually you want to do a more in-depth review on more than just the amount of money that you have.
Can I add a quick comment on clarification? This is Jenna Berman in Region 2. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to say also, I thought it might be helpful. I saw someone asked about certified and non-certified agencies, and I just want to say that taking a little extra time, I think this is so great. So Leanne and Eula, thank you so much, because I just wanted to mention that a lot of the agencies that apply, especially like in my region, smaller towns, I have 100 towns in my region, right? So the certified agencies are the biggies, like City of Eugene or Lane County, who have like a bureaucratic sophistication level that they can handle federal money. And then there's a whole lot of other ones, and they apply and their projects may well be really great, but they may not have as strong of a depth of understanding about what it would take for them to work with ODOT to get it delivered, right? And so I would bet that I have to look more at the list, but I just wanted to explain that a little bit. So the certified agencies are usually the minority because not that many agencies go through this very rigorous process to become certified, or in my region anyway. And so there's a lot of smaller communities. So if we take some extra time to make sure that their goals and strategies and what they really put in the application lines up with what it will actually take for ODOT to help them deliver it, that's great. So I just want to give that context if it's helpful.
That's super helpful. Thank you, Jenna.
Thanks, Jenna.
Yes.
Yeah, Carrie. Sorry.
Hi,
Sorry,
I had
Andrew.
a comment exactly to that point where I was looking at a lot of the proposals and the smaller entities had a hard time scoring high on these project grants. And so wondering, is there any way that we could look at, what they scored low on and possibly give them an advice or even a class on how they could improve their proposal?
Thank you, Carrie.
Hmm.
We will have some discussion, some time for discussion. So I think I'll move us on in our slides because y'all are starting to hit on some of the things that we want to discuss with you all. So let's go real quickly to project refinement phase 2 one more time. I just want to the next slide, Roberto. I just want to note that we are moving all of the project refinement onto phase 2. We didn't limit this at all. There were only a couple of additional anyway, this is all of the project refinement applications that we got. And again, for a couple of different reasons, we want to kind of mirror the construction process, as well as we want to make sure that we get the widest amount of like spread across the state by including all of the projects. And we heard that in the comments in OBPAC's initial comments as well. So we wanted to make sure that we're moving all of those projects forward to a phase 2. Next slide, please. So this is what we heard back in general from OBPAC's feedback so far, just in an initial project information review. We heard that there is sort of a general support of these phase 1 projects moving on to phase 2. We heard that there was a desire to have a conversation about projects that fill gaps versus projects that upgrade existing facilities. We heard that geographic distribution was important to folks, and we also heard that there were some areas of the state and some communities that weren't represented in the applications, and so folks wanted to talk about outreach a little bit more, kind of to what Carrie just mentioned. So we have 2 kind of areas of discussion for today. We thought that hearing about like gaps versus upgrades and geographic distributions would be a great conversation to see where committee members lie on those topics, because we think that we can use those as tiebreakers as we get better estimates and better scopes and have a more accurate project list over the next couple of months. We'll be able to utilize OBPAC's members' thoughts about these 2 topics as tiebreakers for projects near the cut line whenever it's very hard to make a decision on which projects to fund. Also, we would love to discuss outreach recommendations for coastal communities in region ODOT Region 3 and ODOT Region 5, which I realize now that I'm saying it out loud are kind of code words for people that don't know the ODOT regions, which why would you? So Region 3 is sort of like our southern coastal area, like southern Oregon, like Medford and Ashland, and then out to the coast, Brookings and Coos Bay. And Region 5 is kind of the whole eastern swath of Oregon, all the way up from the border with Washington state, although through Ontario and all the way down to the very bottom of our Oregon border, kind of like east of Bend and all the way over. So some of our more rural communities for sure. So I'm going to go on to the one more slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about next steps, and then we'll come back to these discussion questions and any questions that you have about just the PowerPoint in general. So our anticipated next steps are that we send projects to this phase 2 to delivery and operations to do a project review. We come back to OBPAC as our sort of our public process for our transportation alternative funds. Then the recommended project list goes to the Oregon Transportation Commission for approval, likely at their July 31st meeting. And then we back in ODOT, we work on that the relevant STIP amendments, STIP being the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, where we have to put all of our federal funding in order to get the expense accounts to be able to start spending that money. So we'll wrap up with that STIP amendment. Just a couple of notes for the future. Again, our next probable solicitation in 2026 is anticipated to be with state funds, so it'll be a slightly easier process. Also, that staff are working will in the meantime work to update our application and our guidelines to help really mitigate these complexities with federal fundings. Also, it'll give staff time to review some updated transportation alternative guidelines around project delivery, with the goal of helping just make this more streamlined and smoother into the future. So I think that I'm going to copy and paste our current discussion questions into the chat. Then we can probably stop sharing a screen and kind of get into Q&A and discussion questions. That way we can see all of the faces. So unless we've got a question in the chat that's about a specific slide, I think we can stop sharing the screen.
Not about a specific slide. You have 2 general questions in the chat.
Okay, great. So I think we can stop sharing, Roberto. There we go. Now I can see everybody. Thank you.
So I don't want to skip Kathy's question, but I think I have a faster answer to Emma's. So I do want to take Emma's question really quickly first, and then we'll go back to Kathy's question. Emma's is about the 6 million minimum for project refinement. Is it a carryover from last cycle, or did we establish that as a policy for all cycles? And wondering if they could shift the proportions of funding for project refinement versus construction. And so my understanding of this, and Leanne can correct me if I'm wrong, is that at least for this cycle, the 6 million minimum was for this cycle. I don't believe that, I do think that in past cycles, there was a minimum that was chosen for every cycle so that every single cycle had some project refinement, and it kind of depended on the dollar amount that was available completely for the allocation. So in this case, that 6 million was set for this cycle, and it can go up. I'm not sure if we want to go lower than that, but I think we can the committee can decide to go higher if they would like to do more project refinement, and then we'll have slightly less available for construction. But I do believe that was just the amount set for this cycle. And that was a quick one, so I don't want to skip Kathy's question though. So I definitely saw it and we should discuss, but let me know if you have any questions about that item.
Thank you for that response. Okay, I think we maybe just hop into discussion on, yeah, Kathy, if you want to go ahead and just ask these questions as well out loud, please do.
Yeah, happy to. And I apologize, Ula, that I didn't send some of this in advance because I was just looking at the scoring today. And so Carrie brought this up a little bit as well, and I'd like to go a little bit beyond just promising to help smaller communities or different regions that aren't scoring as well. I'd like us to look at the scoring because one of the things that I like numbers, so I just did a percentage on ratio of applicants. And so just in total applications, Region 2 submitted 34% of the applications, and Region 1 only submitted 29%, yet in construction alone, we're on your list, possibly 5 applications, which is 19% could move forward, and only 7% of Region 2 would move forward in construction. To me, that indicates a bias in the scoring somewhere that we can maybe address by correcting what we're scoring. And if it's not population, because that's why I asked the question earlier, is where does population factor in? So if it's not population, I don't know if it's familiarity with Region 1 over Region 2. I don't know where in scoring Region 2 is scoring lower when they're submitting obviously more applications, which to me indicates need, right? If you're submitting a higher number of applications, you're saying that this program meets your need more than other people who are submitting less applications who say, maybe this isn't worth it. Maybe we don't have the capacity. Maybe we don't have the need. And so I'm seeing a discrepancy between people who are applying and people who are receiving the award. And I'm not sure what in scoring is doing that.
Evaluating the scoring is a really good point. What I would definitely say is I think that we should learn from this experience and then evaluate for the next cycle, because we publish our scoring criteria along with the application at the very beginning. So I think that changing it mid-cycle people may have applied for different projects if they would have known we were scoring based on population. So I don't this is something that I would love to talk about more for a future solicitation. I just wanted to clarify that we're not talking about changing the current scoring.
No, I'm not talking about that
just because
either.
we already did. Awesome. Great.
Right. No, I'm not talking about that either.
Let's talk about it.
I'm talking about specifically if we have 34% of the applicants coming from a specific region, then let's say they're the highest percentage asking for these grant fundings. then it makes sense that they not be among the lowest in receiving grant funding. And if that's simply based on low scores, there's something wrong in there, right?
Yeah, we can
So
reevaluate
that later, but I also think that they should be granted an opportunity to get more of the funding in this round. Because we're obviously moving some things forward, not based on scoring, right? But like, for example, Region 5 only had one application. It makes sense in an equitable fashion to move Region 1's only application forward, regardless of score, so that every region can receive some funding. But it doesn't seem equitable to me for Region 2 to receive 7% of funding when they had 34% of the applications.
I think this is a very big can of worms, which I'm happy to, this is OBPAC's here to talk about it. I will say that there was an argument made that need, the number of applications is equivalent to need. That is not necessarily true, because you could not have capacity to submit an application and have a ton of need. Also, geographic distribution is critically important. I think ODOT recognizes that. One thing to consider is that it sounds like a model you're perhaps sort of framing is an equal amount of grant funding in relation to the amount applied. And I don't know, there could be, some region could have a ton of applications that are of lower quality. I'm not saying that's the case, but if a region had lower scoring applications, but they had a ton of applications, that doesn't necessarily. The question is, do we want to be funding sort of the level of applications, like very, very well thought out projects, or numerous projects? And I think that's, I think OBPAC's position, maybe we discussed that, but in my world, I would rather, I want geographic distribution. Absolutely. We need projects across the entire state. That is, I don't know if we have a requirement in this program to ensure equal geographic distribution. I don't know if that's a policy of this program. And if that is, or we're hearing it isn't, if that's something that we feel is critically important as OBPAC, that's a recommendation I think we could make for future cycles. So just to start the conversation, perhaps.
Yeah, generally speaking, on the federal funding, this is very high level. The transportation alternatives do need to be spent in various population sizes. And roughly speaking, I think, and I don't believe this is all of ODOT's TA funds, but I think at least in this program, it will hit all of the various levels, because even though the biggest awards are in maybe more urban areas, definitely rural areas are represented in, thank you, Leanne, transportation alternatives, are represented in the projects, both in planning and definitely in the kind of top 18 that we are planning, or kind of planning on moving forward to phase 2 to look at. So there's definitely wide population representation, and we look at it more in that way rather than geographical. Like there must be X amount in Region 5. It's more about the population.
And that's again why I asked the population question, because I'd like to know where it's reflected for these smaller communities. I would say the
closest in the criteria would be in our social equity index, looking at the disparities there. That's really, I think, where communities that maybe aren't as urban, but perhaps have high income disparities or equity disparities, that's where we would see it the most. And those were, I think, a quarter of the points in the criteria goes to equity.
And I'm not advocating, to Andre's point, I'm not advocating for an exact percentage of applications to award. I know that's not even possible, having conducted some grant funding and programs. But what I am saying is that's something we should look at and find where in the scoring there's not a lineup to them being more successful, because that's an opportunity for the next round, right? And if this group can recommend other projects that didn't make the 150 list in place of let's say I have 2 projects in region 2 and 3, I would like to see move forward as opposed to a 5th project for region 1. Is that something that could be considered? And is there capacity for ODOT to weigh those out in a way that says, yes, this has to be deliverable, they scored less, but is the project meet all of the recommendations or requirements of the purpose of these funds?
This is Dave. I'd like to jump in real quick and just point out that using regions as an indicator of population is not 100% accurate, right? So region 2, for example, right? I mean, you've got Newport and you've got Corvallis, and they are no way similar in their budgets or their ability to produce high quality applications. So I mean, I think the social equity, where you're looking at actual population density per application, probably makes more sense than looking at percentages by region necessarily. Obviously, region 1 is kind of a unique animal, but anyway, just wanted to throw that in there.
So what I'm hearing is that, OBPAC seems to have sort of a unified interest in equitable representation. I think that I can't speak on everyone's behalf, but I just, in the conversations I've had with folks, I know that that is critically, or I have assessed that that is critically important to us. And so I think it sounds like there are limitations to sort of ways in which we can alter the program for this cycle, which, applications are in, things have been sort of set up. That's it seems like it may be messy to go down that path. However, it does sound like there's likely potential to have maybe an enhanced discussion and look at sort of distributions and just get those numbers in front of us so we can reflect on them, and then maybe in the future build a strategy to support certain regions that we feel maybe need additional support. Is that an accurate assessment, or do people have other thoughts?
I think it is a really good idea to just I do really like the presentations and everything, but I think this has happened like multiple times in OBPAC meetings where we have a presentation and then we all have a million ideas, but none of us have organized our thoughts yet. And then it just becomes like I don't know, it's not very productive. So I think it's a really good idea if we we could maybe make memos or something of our arguments for various things.
Yes, yeah. So does that, I want to be conscious of ODOT capacity, but Ula and Leanne, is there a universe in which we could maybe hold some time to at a future meeting just sort of have this conversation about sort of looking at and I know these results are preliminary. I don't know if it would be smarter to wait until the actual final funding is allocated and then to sort of look into the future about how it went and how we feel, and if it feels like it's representative of what OBPAC members want to see. And I don't know if we have the authority to eventually change the metrics or the scoring criteria. I'm unclear about that, but there's interest.
I think I can speak to this a little bit. I do think that there is an opportunity to speak a little bit more today about things like geographic distribution and gaps, filling gaps versus making upgrades on existing infrastructure. Because I do think understanding where OBPAC members feel about geographic distribution and gaps versus upgrades will help us as we get more information back from the regions and move to like that next phase of having a more solid list. We can utilize those priorities or goals or tendencies that you guys would like to that you all would like to see. So that would help us in an immediate fashion. But then I absolutely, Andre, think that you're nailing it where you're like, let's do an evaluation of who we funded and why did some people score well, why did some people not score well, so that we can use it to tweak our process for future evaluation. I will say, like, from my experience on the Safe Routes to School side, we were able to learn through those application cycles that small communities actually do really well in the Safe Routes to School program. Like a pretty large percentage of the funds go to communities under 25,000. So that's something that we learned going through a process. And that was great. We also learned that sometimes projects in Region 4 don't score as well on our safety points. Our safety points tend to, in the OCP program, as well as Safe Routes to School, tend to prioritize projects that have the risk factors for crashes, or that would alleviate the risk factors for crashes. And for whatever reason, in Region 4, the roads are narrower, slower, like they just don't have as high of those risk factors. And so they weren't scoring as well in the safety criteria kind of as a whole. So we were able to learn through that process, and then having that information helps us make adjustments in the future. So not having spent a whole lot of time on OCP, but spending some time on other similar construction grants, I know that that I can say with confidence that let's have some sort of values-based conversations now that will help staff understand how you would like the next phase to go. And then let's get back together after this process, do that evaluation of all the questions that folks are asking, so that we can have the intentional conversation of how do we want to score next time, or how do we want to evaluate projects next time.
Amazing. Thank you. Beth.
Yeah, thank you. These are all really, really good questions. So Andre reshared the questions, and I just want to double check that these are the right ones. But we kind of want to have a values conversation around gaps and upgrades, gaps versus upgrades, and geographic distribution. And then pause and then have another discussion around outreach recommendations for future rounds. This is more of a future thinking conversation, but based on the feedback that we heard of, like, we didn't see a lot of applications from Region 3 or Region 5 and from the coast. So I'm also noticing that we didn't plan in a break. Did we plan a break in the OBPAC agenda at all?
It's not on the agenda, but we were going to do it after this conversation.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have some hands up, so if we want to get to those, Beth, I think
great.
First, and then
let's do Beth and then Emma.
She's getting her speakers on.
She's turning on her system. Just a moment.
Can everybody hear me?
You can.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Sorry for that delay. The question is gaps versus upgrades for the future. My 2 cents is, I believe gaps, but really what's most important to me, if we're trying to decide who's on that cutting edge of getting or not, I might go for commuters versus recreational, and it's hard to tell which kind of trail is which, but encouraging commuting and making safe commuting, I think, is very important. So that's my 2 cents. And safety. And there's also, so I kind of did a little, still hear me okay? It's telling me the battery.
Yeah, I had one follow-up comment, Beth, is that we can really only evaluate based on the questions that we asked, and we may or may not have commuter data. So I just want to say that out loud.
Okay.
I hear
Okay.
you. I don't think we asked for that. So it would be very hard, I think, for us to evaluate based on commuter versus recreation. But
Can that be a part of the future?
yes,
Asking?
that's one of those things that we can talk about for the future conversation.
That's all I'm
So,
talking about.
so
I
the
know that this
perfect.
is a really good process and it's happening very well. And I just love all the what you're doing, Ula. And also that I guess these are OBPAC criteria that's being followed. I might tweak the okay, so staying along with what's important personally to me, if on scoring on that cutting edge, then safety, then outreach, how much they outreached. And another point on outreach, I just want to say as the planner in this group, that's my role here in OPPAC, is that outreach in planning is really changing. Public participation is changing. And we're really, I think DLCD, Department of Land Conservation and Development, is really working on getting new ways for people to be reached. So I'm hoping that in this and in all ODOT things that there's kind of a criteria of how communities outreach. If it's just an online questionnaire and nothing else, or just daytime meetings and nothing else, then things need to change. So that comment. And then a couple other comments I have on perhaps up for next year, for next cycle, is safety doesn't here right now refer to danger per se on what kinds of roads. That I've noticed, like a road might score the same based on safety, whether it's straight and visibility is for a long time, or it's windy and uphill and downhill and narrow. Size of the lane isn't part of this, the bike lane right now. So perhaps incorporating that in another way into safety, giving those roads in terms of topography. And this would be very difficult, but also in weather. But we won't even try that because it's just too much information.
Need a magic wand for
I'm
that
just
one.
talking
Yeah.
about, I'm
Yeah.
used to, I don't ride my bike, but I drive in crazy weather out here on the coast. I'm in Newport, everybody. So, okay, so that's what I wanted to say. And then maybe somehow in future safety criteria to incorporate, well, I'll just shorthand the book Dangerous by Design is a wonderful book which talks about why we're having more accidents than we ever have, more fatalities of bike and peds because of these bigger vehicles that kill people rather than maim them. So perhaps taking into consideration larger trucks and also even that tend to the lights are brighter that tend to blind bicyclists and pedestrians. That's all I have to say. I'm cutting out, Kathy tells me, so good job.
Thank you. We heard 98% of you, Beth, so it was great. It was, yeah.
Thanks, Beth. I think I'm next. Okay, thanks, Andre. Before talking about gaps versus upgrades, I just want to note that there was a survey completed at the end of one of the previous Oregon Community Paths cycles. And I don't know if the loop was closed with bringing the learnings about the previous cycles from the surveys, I believe, to the participants of the program. Forget if OBPAC did the survey too or not, but there was some attempt to evaluate. And I don't know if that evaluation got synthesized and then integrated into this cycle. So that's worth looking into a little bit more given the staff changes. And then relating to gaps versus upgrades, I've spoken in the past to the need for maintenance for off-street paths. I don't think that there is a funding source for that. I personally don't think that Oregon Community Paths should be that funding source. There is so much need in the state to complete the Oregon Bike Ped Plan vision and policies to build out our pedestrian and bicycle networks across the state. This funding is not going to get us there. Maybe in 50 years, it's a pretty long time horizon if we're just focusing on filling gaps. And so I like to focus Oregon Community Paths on filling gaps, and yet as a committee outside of this grant program, have more discussion, maybe learn from ODOT maintenance staff or whoever the appropriate entities are, what funding does exist, or maybe it doesn't, for maintenance of off-street paths and other bike ped facilities, and is that a separate effort that we should be trying to queue up consistent revenue for so that that need is being addressed? But we're not taking this one funding source and trying to do everything with it. I think we're already seeing some of that in this cycle where there's like seismic upgrade projects for sewer treatment plants, but they're coming to Oregon Community Paths. So I'd rather be clear about this is a program to build the off-street path network. Let's focus it on that. Let's get as many miles built as possible. And then recognize there's other needs that we need to also address outside this process. But I'd like to hear from other committee members. If someone feels strongly that, yes, we should be taking our existing paths, let's resurface them, address the tree roots and the uplift and safety issues that we designed it back in the 90s, thinking it was great, but now we know better. I'd like to hear if there's other opinions, but I vote for gaps, even though I can't vote. That's my preference.
I totally agree with you. Or sorry, you're gonna say something, Leanne?
No, only that Beth is hand still up, so I didn't know if that was a new hand. There you go. Okay.
I like everything you said, Emma. I think that's really well thought out. I also my personal opinion is that a bad bike path would not stop me from biking, or a bad sidewalk or something, but the lack of said path would completely make me not do not make me commute to wherever I was going to go. So my opinion, I guess, is that I would rather fill gaps than upgrade existing paths. Yes, that's it.
I don't know if you need agreement on that, but I would have that same lean for a cutoff. That if it tends to be a gap filler, that's better in my opinion as well than to do an upgrade on something.
I also liked what Beth said about preference for commuters, but I know that we talked about really hard to do, but yeah.
I do think the application requested information about it being a transportation link, not more so than just recreational. So I do think, if I remember correctly, pretty much all of the applications dealt with paths and trails that were meant to definitely serve a commuting / transportation focus and a goal rather than simply a recreational trail. So
yeah. And I think what I was also trying to say is that I don't think we could get like numbers either of like how many are using for this or for that. But I agree that the program it focuses on those transportation uses.
Very much so, yeah.
I'd like to just introduce a question to OBPAC members, just regarding, is there anyone who has a preference in a tie-breaking situation between completing a gap and doing an upgrade, preference towards upgrades? Oh, go ahead, Beth. Oh, we can't hear you, but you can type in for us. Okay, so that's, I'll wait for your typing, but that's like one, so it doesn't sound like, it sounds universally OBPAC sort of agrees that we support gaps versus upgrades. The question I have is, are we now comparing gaps to geographic distribution now that we've chosen gaps, or, okay, it's just a separate criteria that we're looking at now. Okay. So the question is, should geographic distribution be a, yes, Mavis, please.
Sorry, I can't find my little hand thing. I'm sure it's somewhere. Yeah, the geographic balance, I don't think somebody should get something just because they applied and nobody else did in a region. However, I think when we look at the big map, we really should, we need to make sure that there is distribution. It's not a hard and fast, like everybody gets some, because then you get like a whole bunch of things that don't necessarily deserve to be there. It still needs to be a good project. It still needs to score high. However, when we look at it with a lens, if it's one of those on the cut line, I would totally say, yeah, give it to them. Nobody in that region has it. And yeah, I know that Safe Routes to School, the little guy does score well, but I tell you, Eastern Oregon doesn't score well with the walking and biking. So yeah, anything you can kick this way is awesome. That's all I have.
Thank you. Yeah, and I will say, just because there's just the one application for Region 5, that was a really good application and scored by the criteria separate of it being, the only one from Region 5. It would have, even not looking at that, would have made it on the list. It's a very good application. And one of the things we discussed a little bit, I think we had a little open hours on Friday for committee members if they had any questions, was really about something that I was hoping that OPAC could also discuss is what resources in the future ODOT could provide in terms of technical resources for helping these smaller communities. Someone in the chat asked, like, what were some of the things that I might have seen of that for lower scoring applications? And, I haven't really synthesize this very clearly. And I do hope so before I go, before I'm done with my rotation, to kind of synthesize takeaways from this solicitation, for the next round. But some of the things are maybe a little bit more that I could kind of tell really quickly is when you have the resources of a TriMet or a Eugene or something like that. And so you see these applications for construction, and then you see these very long, detailed narratives about a lot of different items and the cost estimates. They've gotten a consultant to do, or, there's a lot of different things that might have gone into it versus other smaller cities that maybe didn't have those resources, and which I was definitely very mindful about not letting that be the, a determining factor at all, because some of those applications were really, really strong because they really dived into the communities themselves and which communities they discussed and what the goal was. So then they end up just not having as strong scores on the cost estimate portion, for example, or things like that. That I think there is a way that that the committee can help discuss how can we help smaller communities, rural communities, coastal communities, Region 5 communities or Southern Oregon. How can we help them with that resource gap between the, an agency that has in-staff planners and has in-staff, folks to do grant writing versus some that maybe don't. And I wonder if there's some discussion to be had on ways that we could look into that in the future as well. For the next which is more important for federal funding, because our federal funding requirements for the estimates and delivery are just a lot more bigger and arduous than a state funded project. So
I think that is such an important conversation to have after we close out this round, because we can get so caught in the weeds, and we need to make decisions on what we have, what we're presented with all the information that people had, and then we need to go forth and make it even better. My question really was like, is there something specific, like those small towns were just like that Region 2, they all had this and they all missed it? Is that something that we need to look at for this round even? Like going forward in the future, yeah, let's fix that. But was there something that was just like, they all didn't turn in this one slip of paper kind of thing where you're like, well, actually, we need to go back and readjust because of this? I'm assuming that there's not a succinct answer like that, correct?
Nothing came up like that necessarily. But that's really like, if it did, we would have brought it, we would have tried to fix that, because we really do want to pick the best projects, not like this group of people made like a mistake and these people didn't, therefore they get it. And yeah, so there wasn't anything clear like that. I think Dell might have his hand raised, but I don't know for sure. Oh, but sorry, I didn't mean to cut that conversation off short either.
Dell, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Oh,
Now
no,
we
I
can.
did have my hand raised a while ago, but I withdrew it. I was going to say when we were talking about gaps versus maintenance, I don't think it's either or. I think each one has to be measured on its own merits. I think in general, I would tend to go with gaps too, but if take something major like the Springware corridor here in Portland area, and we do have some gaps. Hopefully they'll be addressed sometime. But if a tree fell down and across the path and we needed to, or something worse, yeah, I think repairing that would be more important than filling up another gap. I mean, maintenance would include actually the trail gets damaged, that manufactures a new gap, and I would think that repairing that would be more important. So that's just my take.
I just want to clarify, and I'm going to speak, but someone let me know if they feel like I'm wrong on this one. But currently, OCP doesn't fund necessarily maintenance, but it does fund upgrades to existing infrastructure. So just want to make that clarification. I don't think we can fund maintenance with federal funds, so that's why I wanted to.
So what do you consider upgrades? Something like putting the lights on the along the path?
Yeah, that's a great example.
That type of thing.
And improvements, yeah.
Yeah,
if it's improving the path.
Like the path already exists.
Upgrading
This
a path.
this is an improvement.
Something like paving an unpaved path. Would that be considered an upgrade, or would that be a maintenance item? I mean, this is like stuff we've done to the Springwater Trail and to the Trolley Trail, and hopefully sometime soon to the to the extend the Springwater farther. There's a trail there. It's not paved.
Yeah, thanks, Del. The for OCP it has to be a paved path. So so that's just kind of one of our criteria. And I also wanted to note that in general, we've been kind of talking about this as like a prioritization tool to use like right at a cut line if there's two projects that in every other way have like weigh the same. This would help us make those provide more information to make those tougher decisions. So in general, the projects will stand on their own merit. This is just kind of like if there are projects that in other ways have the same merit, would we prefer to do a gap or a upgrade to an existing trail?
Okay.
Thank you, Del. I also wanted to add one more comment about the kind of the geographic distribution piece, which is that an example of understanding what OBPAC members are interested in for geographic distribution. Like one of the reasons why staff really recommends that all of the project refinement projects at least move forward into a phase 2. It's because there are several Region 3 projects in our project refinement list, and project refinement is kind of building the pipeline of projects for this program. So by trying to fund as many of those project refinement projects as possible. And in regions where we're not seeing as many projects, that will help that geographic distribution in the future, just with like a small tweak of like, yeah, let's do the additional analysis on all these project refinement projects. There's not that many over a cut line, and that way we'll have more information whenever we are ready to do that sort of final recommendation. So that's a way that we can hear what you guys are saying, what you all are saying about these communities where we're not seeing a lot of applications and that geographic balance or a spread, and we can use that to help make programmatic calls that will help those goals in the future.
Can you give a little more detail about exactly what project refinement means? Is that just something that's still in the planning stage and you're going to advance the details in the planning? Is that what it means?
Generally speaking, it's the way we would obligate it in a federal project, it's in the planning phase. So it can be anything up to 30% design. So it could be the trying to find a preferred alignment. It could be a conceptual study, or it can be further planning work to get you to the very, very early, 10% up to 30%, I think, design. And then once it hits that, then it officially goes into a preliminary engineering phase, which then have different requirements. And then once you trigger a PE phase, then you start triggering different federal funding requirements about payback if you don't finish a project within a certain amount of time. Whereas planning phase dollars, it's meant to be planning. And so it's meant to really dive into the project. And then if it ends up being that it doesn't work out, there's no real loss. There's no like payback that has to happen to the federal government. So.
Does that clear that up
Can I
for
make
you?
another?
Yeah, sort of.
Kathy, go for it.
Sorry, I have a lot of questions because I'm very new to this and I don't have the benefit of having heard whatever presentation or changes or input the committee has made in previous years. So I apologize for having a lot of questions. I'm trying to wrap my head around what this is and what you're trying to deliver. So on something Mavis said on the geographic distribution, the reason that I kind of want to ask the questions about scoring, and again, I know this is going back to population, but the two places where the applications can get the most points, right, are in that equity section and in the safety section. And obviously communities with denser populations are going to score higher on some of the safety criteria. Not all of them. I think you have a balanced criteria in there, distance to schools and other things that impact that. I don't think I understand yet, and maybe this can come after as well. I don't think I understand what you mean by the social equity index, and I did go to your map. But if it's simply, where the accidents are happening, then that geographic distribution on a cut makes a difference because some of these places are obviously more rural, so it can be less population or less commuter traffic, whichever way that might go. I don't know that we have enough information, or at least I don't feel like I have enough information, but perhaps you do. And so you can weigh that in a cut decision. Was it safety that they score better in safety only because they were a denser population? And if that's the case, maybe that doesn't meet the criteria to make the cut. I'm just trying to wrap my head around this and see if I can understand. I understand it might not be possible this round, but there's a lot of things in here that just make it difficult to be able to say one way or another whether one project is even, it's a difficult task you have to measure apples to oranges, is I guess what I'm saying.
Kathy, I'm not positive if there's a question in there, but I did want to say, like, good job. I feel like you actually you're following really well, and that most of the committee members haven't gone through a process like this before. So I'm sure everybody appreciates your questions, and your analysis of the safety criteria actually is pretty right on. It can tend to prioritize higher populated areas because it's road size, it's average annual daily traffic, it's the speed of the road. When I say road size, I mean like the number of lanes, like the crossing distance that you would have to cross that road, average annual daily traffic speed, and in general history of crashes. And how severe were those crashes. So that average annual daily traffic number specifically can is really usually in a higher populated area.
Yeah, I can't speak very much to the social equity index, and maybe I don't know if anyone else on this committee can, but I do think in the safety, like, and I just want to kind of second what Leanne said, the safety things that tend to benefit more denser areas are the street size and the speed and the ADT. But if there were crashes or severe crashes, even in small areas, that can be a big lift, even in a smaller area, in terms of the points that were given for by the criteria, the prioritization criteria. If there was any documented or noted in the application crashes, then that actually could would totally equalize any small or ADT or smaller road. So those crashes were really important and were a big part of the scores if that data was available and presented in the application.
And I see your hand, Emma. I am going to just quickly respond regarding the social equity index because I looked it up and it appears that it considers age 65 and older, people living in poverty, limited English proficiency, and people living with disabilities.
And income as well. But I'm like 99% sure, although it wasn't in your list, so I'm like, I should double check that.
I think maybe it's like income. Is it like total income, or was living in poverty the income threshold?
Oh
like
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, living in poverty. You nailed it. Sorry, my brain didn't connect the two.
All good.
And it's not weighed on how many people it's yeah, the number of humans don't play into that index. So a lot of Oregon's rural areas score can potentially score highly in the social equity index.
Emma.
Cool. Thanks, Kathy. You're bringing great questions and suggestions forward, so please keep speaking up. Just want to echo that. Back to what Leanne had said earlier, I, as a committee member, would support the example of, okay, if Region 3 was having trouble participating in this community path program previously, and we can fund project refinement projects so that they can queue up for construction in the future, then that could be a solution to something we may be starting to see a lesson learned emerging on. And so I don't know the details. We haven't really closed the loop fully on the evaluation, but if we can validate that, yes, one of the lessons we learned is that a certain region or certain types of communities are having trouble participating, and we have an opportunity to fix that and add additional support in this round by adding project refinement projects to queue into construction later on, I would fully support that. That's the type of full circle, like we plan, we do, we evaluate, and then we actually integrate what we learned from the evaluation. I would love to be seeing that. And so if there's anything we can do real time that's in that vein, I'd love to see that.
Yes, Kathy.
Sorry, this really is my last comment. So that actually, what you said, Emma, actually makes me want to now weigh in geographic, the geographic question on the refinement, because, and I don't know what ODOT's capacity is, right? But if your capacity is that you can work with all of these agencies from all of these regions and bring them to the stage where they can be successful in a future round. I think one is doing a great job because of what's available to them already. And that to me, if there's a cutoff to be made, I would bump one over anything else because they have capacity to do some of this work on their own, where some of these other more rural, smaller communities perhaps don't. And maybe it's not an issue for ODOT, but if there's a capacity issue from ODOT, I think if you're preparing the next round, you focus more on those regions that are not submitting applications on a regular basis or are not successful in getting awards on a regular basis or in the high dollar category, because the need, I think, is there, but the capacity maybe to be better prepared for what's next or to deliver is maybe not there. And so for me, then I would want the cut to be a geographic question and say, you know, one is doing a great job, and now there's 5 projects in refinement going to move forward. There's 6 in region 2. What do you have time to do? I'd rather you spend more time on geographic areas that are less successful. That would be my preference.
Thanks, Kathy. I see that there's a question from Nolan in the chat that kind of takes us in a different direction. So I want to pause and just make sure that this piece feels wrapped up, and we can go to Nolan's
Are you
question.
getting what you need from us?
Yeah, well, I think I'm hearing that gaps feels like it tends to be a priority. So if there's a decision to be made at a cut line, let's do that analysis. It also feels like geographic distribution, especially when it comes to people that might receive less funding or smaller communities, like if there's an opportunity to help or people that we haven't seen applications from, if there's a possibility to help build that pipeline, that we should be working to do that through our outreach, through our project refinement program, and potentially another lens to potentially use at a cut line if there's like a new applicant that we haven't funded before versus someone we funded a couple of times or an area that we funded a lot. Those would be some options that OBPAC would want to see considered. That's what I'm hearing. Does that feel about right?
Yes, I do want to complicate things just a little bit before we switch. I did want to echo what Beth mentioned about safety being personally for me, that is I would like to see that as, and this doesn't have to be, this is just sharing my vision, that being a tiebreaker, specifically the ability for an investment to reduce death and serious injuries. So if we could invest in a project that saves someone's life rather than make someone's scenic bike ride a little prettier, I would allocate the funds to saving lives. And then also I have an interest in, I don't know if you're capturing this in the applications, but average annual users is a stat to consider. You know, I know that does perhaps bias more urban areas, but not inherently. And so it's something to, look at. So just some other things to consider through this process. But I think definitely want to reiterate safety, especially as being sort of a core goal of OBPAC.
Also, my question was not like you do not have to answer it. It was just like me, like for future reference. If you want to think about that more.
There was an interesting thing that happened this cycle that's real specific to this cycle that we can touch on, Nolan, that gets at your question. So maybe we'll answer that one really quickly. So we were talking about the distance from a school, and maybe I'm not quite getting the question correctly, but what I did want to note is that through the IIJA or the BIL, which is the Infrastructure and Jobs Act from a couple of years ago, there were some additional federal funds that that staff that were dedicated to safe routes to school through the Oregon Transportation Commission. And knowing that building trails to schools is important in many communities, and we can't do it in our current Safe Routes to School program due to the state funds, we kind of punted it over to the Community Paths program and said, hey, here's an additional, I think it was $3 million that you can add into your next solicitation. Just make sure we fund X number, $3 million worth of projects that will build a trail to a school. So we'll meet the criteria for that funding, use a process that's already happening, and then manage those projects in a program that makes sense to manage them in. And so we did ask some questions around, is your project close to a school? But it was mostly to make sure that we were meeting that criteria. So I just wanted to just point that out. I do know that schools are a destination that OCP generally looks to as in a long list of destinations that that the Oregon Community Paths wants to help people get to. But for this specific round, because of those additional federal funds, we needed to ask a couple of additional questions to make sure that we were meeting that criteria.
Yeah, no, I think I like bringing schools into it. I was just curious if that one quarter comes from like safe routes to school and if that's like a number they use, because I've noticed, at least in Portland, there's like a very distinct boundary around a lot of schools where it's like, oh, safe routes to school spent like a lot of money around this school, and then you move like a few blocks away from it and it's like, well, how would anyone outside of this boundary ever get to the school? Because it just becomes like an oblivion past a certain point. At least that happens in my neighborhood. And so I guess I was just curious if that was a thing, but it did not. I like that it's in the application. I just was wondering where that came from.
The quarter mile generally indicates that kids, I mean, depending on the age of the kid, a quarter mile helps a larger number of people to walk and bike. Usually it's within that mile radius when most kids are walking specifically. The further out you go, it's is bicycling. And then the closer you are to the school, the more likely it is that people are walking. But the federal funds extended the guidance for safe routes to school to 2 miles, and so our current safe routes to school program now can fund projects within 2 miles. So there's some flexibility in there, and with the inclusion of high schools.
Thank you for that. So I thought it was a weird side.
No, all good information.
Amazing. Great conversation. Leanne and Ula, are you feeling good about sort of next steps from us? Really appreciate you fielding all of our questions, and what a great topic this is. It's super exciting. At the end of the day, this is, why a lot of us are here to have things move forward, get built, do some really good planning on things that serve our communities. And so I want to thank you so much for leading this work and letting us be involved in it. It's great, even when it's challenging. So.
Well, thank you very much for your input. I wanted to note that we will work with Ian to get back on your agenda for when we have that analysis of like how a lot of the things that we're talking about for the future. I think folks wanted a little bit more analysis around who's applying and how is it all going to pan out, and are there some patterns that we're seeing that can help address some of these things that folks have really brought up, which is around like safety, some around like further conversations to come, and we'll work with Ian to figure out when the right time is to get back in front of you all to do some of that additional analysis and discussion that will help set us up for the next round, which we're really excited about.
Yeah, and this was really super helpful for when we move now over to kind of the regions as they're looking at these. This will definitely give us some guidance for them too as to what they're looking for, what information they'll need to really help make sure their scoping process and everything is going goes as well as possible. And then we have some more things to discuss on our end on the prioritization criteria and what we're gonna before, no list is final yet, so we're not we haven't decided on any awards or anything like that, so we don't want people to think that like something has like ended or done here. This is actually just the first step, and we'll definitely be back with more information. And I have a lot to think about and look at in terms of the applications and to get some of that data back to y'all for next time when we come. And yeah, super helpful. This is awesome conversation, and I really appreciate y'all having us and to talk about this. And I definitely look forward to seeing y'all again once we have a better idea of what the projects that we can award. Now, we'll say all of the applications are just really, really great. And so at some point though, if we only have so much money, we do have to just decide on where they go. But across the state, I got to learn a ton about a lot of these areas, looking into where they are and reading about them through the applications and the community. So it's really a neat exercise for me to look through all of these great applications. So yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Muted, sorry. Thank you. Amazing. So I think we'll move into our break, which was not officially scheduled on our agenda, but wanted to give you all a break. I'm not sure what our typical interval is. It 10 or 15 minutes?
They've done 10 in the past, but you can choose based on whatever you feel like we have.
There's precedent set, so I'll follow that. So yeah, we'll go ahead and conduct a 10-minute break, but I did want to quickly share that we are going to have a slight agenda shift. Beth does have another meeting to attend, and so we will not be getting introduced to her today. But we will. Will you be able to do that in our July meeting, Beth? Wonderful. And then I was scheduled to introduce myself in July, so I will bump myself to October. And I think we will just sort of punt that item for this meeting. Okay, so the time is 2:56 in a couple of seconds, so we'll come back at 3:06. See you then. All right, welcome back, folks. In lieu of Beth's Meet Your OBPAC member presentation, I did want to just take a quick moment to sort of go over that agenda item again. I think I was absent when it was officially defined, and so I wanted to just have some time to get clear on sort of what we want people to be sharing during those timelines when they are presenting on themselves.
Is Dave here? He gave the first example.
Oh, wonderful.
And I think it was pulled from, oh, sorry, this is Leanne. I think it was pulled from a Safe Routes to School example, like the Safe Routes Committee does it. And
That is
so
correct. It's the same template. If you can just talk a little bit more about it, Leanne.
yeah, I wish I remembered what it was, but there is a template and that's what we were using. And at one point we shared it with folks, and so I can go back into my email, see if I can find it and resend it. But it's something like name a little bit about your past, some of your hobbies that you're interested in. We've learned a lot about where people's families have come from, the music that they like, things along that line. But we'll look for that template again and make sure that you have it so that you can prepare for October.
Perfect.
Or
Thank
July.
you for sharing
Sorry.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, no
Beth
worries.
did
That's
the-
great. Okay, perfect. That's so helpful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Emma.
And that's my apologies for sort of not being present when we originally discussed that. And so take full responsibility. This was just me getting caught up. I think it's a great
No worries.
addition.
No worries at all.
And I also would perhaps propose that we do maybe Beth and I both at the July meeting, since we'll be in person. And then I would encourage a volunteer for the October meeting.
I'm totally fine doing that, I think.
No, awesome. Amazing. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. That was quick. That was easy. Then we are going to go ahead and move on to OBPAC business. And I'm going to pass it over to Roberto to discuss the self-attestation form.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, co-chair. Just wanted to remind folks as part of your homework, you all should have received a self-attestation form. I know that a good percentage of you have already completed it this round of recruitment, and unfortunately, you do have to complete it one more time. The governor's office is requesting that every single person that is appointed through the governor's office needs to complete this form on the yearly basis. And for this form for this filing season of taxes, you have to just make sure that you're putting the 2024 since we'll be doing our taxes during this year. So just go ahead and complete this form. Even if you're declining any type of compensation or if you're requesting compensation, the form needs to be completed. So on the yearly basis, around the month of April, I'll be reminding folks to submit this document so that we have it in our files and upload it onto Workday for the governor's office staff to be able to review. And I think one of the things that they want to make sure is that we also capture folks whose economic situations have changed. Also, if they have gone from public office or public service to the private sector. And so it is just a way for us to track that we're offering any type of compensation out to our folks for their wonderful time and also for all of the work that they do for moving forward our efforts. So I know some of you may are still probably filing taxes, so you're not ready to completely submit this document. Don't worry, I can collect that document when we do have our in-person meeting, or just whenever you feel comfortable in submitting it in the next couple of months, please do so. So if you were wondering what that attestation form is, that's what it's for.
Thank you. And then, does anybody have any questions about that? Pretty straightforward. Just general business bureaucracy. It's good stuff, though. It's important.
This we worked for in the past. I just want to acknowledge that this is exciting. I mean, it's paperwork, so that's not too exciting. But the fact that we have this system set up, it's not a given. It helps improve access to serving on state committees. And so I just want to appreciate staff maintaining the system that it took some effort to put into place in the first place.
Amazing. So then we're going to go ahead and pass it over to Ian to go over some details for our in-person meeting in July.
Yeah, thank you, Andre. So we are slated to hold our first in-person meeting, first and only in-person meeting at our July meeting. So some details that we have shared with you all over email, and then also as part of the survey, which Roberto is screen sharing. We're looking at 2 different dates towards the end of July, which you can see there on your screen. Because of many of you will need to travel, we're looking at splitting our days. So the first day would likely be the typical OBPAC meeting, like what we're doing here now. And then the second day would involve project site visits. And so for the first option, we're looking at July 22nd, which is a Tuesday, and July 23rd, which is a Wednesday. And so this survey, Roberto can talk a little bit more about it, but one of the big things we want to know your preference between these 2 options for that towards the later end of July. Does the Tuesday, Wednesday work better for you, or does the Wednesday, Thursday work better for you? And then we will then begin arranging all of the particulars. It takes a lot of behind the scenes work to put an event like this on. And so we want to be able to make an in-person OBPAC meeting work really well. And so we'd love your support in helping us do that. So if you haven't yet done so, please fill out the survey, and I'll turn it over to Roberto to kind of walk us through what the survey is and those different questions.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. So this is also another piece that it was part of your homework. I believe I have received one response so far. So whenever you have a chance, please review the survey, check your calendars, and see which of these two options work for you. Another item that we have listed here is folks who will be needing a bicycle. Please note that in the survey, we'll be able to coordinate that for you and see if we can rent a bicycle out in the Bend area so that it's available for you. There's also questions around carpooling and who needs any type of transportation. We'll coordinate with other OPAC members or ODOT staff members so that we can create just a fun environment and bus you or send you out to Bend. Then the other piece is just for any type of accommodation. You'll have a section there. Yeah, so whenever you have a chance to complete the form, please do so. I recommend if we can get this in by the end of next week, that would be wonderful. I just want to guarantee that we hit the government rate for hotel rooms and lodging. And so if the more time that we have to work a contract with the hotel or any folks for lodging, I guess the better rates or more guarantee that we get that government rate that we're required to go abide by. So that should be a part of your homework. If for whatever reason you don't see the link, please let me know. I'll be happy to provide that to you. So anyone have any questions? All right, Andre.
Amazing. I just want to say thank you again. That is so much to coordinate. And so while it ends up being a super fun experience for OBPAC members, we know that ODOT staff has to go through a lot of hoops to make it happen. So really appreciate you all. And I can say personally, a July trip to Bend sounds wonderful for me. So really looking forward to it. Sweet. So as you know, some of our members serve on additional external committees representing OBPAC. And so I wanted to hold some space for report backs for if any of those meetings has taken place since we've last gathered, and just an opportunity to share any findings you have. And so the first we have is a Safe Routes to School Advisory Committee with Mavis.
We had a meeting just earlier this week, I believe, this week or last week. And the big thing with that is that we are getting ready for another round of funding, which will be fantastic. And to kind of kick that off, we are having an in-person meeting. I believe it is in Eugene, and it is the last week of May, I believe. And actually my proposal is I've been on the Safe Routes to School Committee for quite a while now, and I'm done on OPAC here in July, I believe, which means I get to leave this in your guys' capable hands. But since that is an in-person meeting, I kind of think maybe whoever will be the new Safe Routes to School OPAC representative maybe should attend that instead of me. So if you're interested in said transition, maybe talk to Ian, figure that out, because we should make that happen, and you should go to that meeting instead of me, because honestly, I am planning a party because my daughter's graduating. So there we go.
Thank you. I also have you listed here, Mavis, as our local government grant program advisory committee representative.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any report backs from that last gathering?
Did I tell you about the audit? No? So they called me and they're doing an audit on that system. Hopefully it will be better than it has been currently. We still need somebody on that committee. So once again, I'm retiring, so you guys get it. And
Yay.
so if anybody's ready to jump on that train, that's another one.
Amazing. I think first and foremost, thank you for your service on OBPAC. And obviously it sounds like there's another meeting before you're gone, but I wanted to say thank you for your time with us and serving on these additional committees, because that's a lot of work. And so really appreciate you doing that. And I think if we can, on our next agendas, we're thinking through that, maybe holding some time. I don't feel necessarily good about appointing someone right now. I think it's a discussion that we probably should have and sort of assess people's availability and things like that. But I think establishing a methodology for these appointments in the future would be a good use of our time.
Timeline wise, we want
Yes.
somebody there at that Safe Routes to School. Are we meeting prior to that date, or should I just plan on going and somebody else can just punt? I just thought it's a great way to get to know everybody, because it's in person. It's setting up the infrastructure for the next round of grants, which, you know, I have my opinions, but you guys undoubtedly have yours too. So, and it would be more applicable for one of you guys to be setting those new parameters. So how's the timeline look on that?
Yeah, what's the date on that next one?
I guess that'd be a report for Roberto or
Yeah, so our next Safe Route to School meeting, the one that Mavis is referring to as an in-person meeting, that's taking place in Eugene for May 29th through the 30th. They're doing something similar where the first day they just do SRAC business, and then the second day they'll do a Safe Route to School site visit throughout Eugene. And so person who will be attending that meeting has the option to also do it hybrid. So there will be a hybrid option as well.
Or if you come to Eugene and you're not named Nolan or Emma, you could hang out with us.
this is actually the committee I was trying to hook Nolan into, so just keep that in mind.
I'm highly interested, but I'm also like, wow, I have a lot to do already. So is it about the same workload as OBPAC?
No.
Oh.
It's pretty light. And they're
Okay.
really, since it's Safe Routes to School, they're very much reaching out to the younger generation, which would be you.
Well, I guess you want to email me on the side and we'll maybe talk about it more?
Sure. I can do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Thank you both. Dell, representative. Also, I know your seat is actually the ORTAC seat. Is that correct? Am I understanding that, which is the Oregon Regional Trails Advisory Committee or Council?
Yeah, unfortunately, they have not done anything much since the pandemic. It's been pretty much a committee on hold for more than 2 years now. It's rather disappointing, but that's the way it is. And as far as the scenic bikeways, that's been all turned over to Cycle Oregon, who has also had a personnel change. There is one thing going on with scenic bikeways, and that's the new Osterheide scenic bikeway should be having a grand opening, I think within the next couple of months. I'm not sure the exact date. But that one is one we've been working on for years and years, and since even before the pandemic. And I believe everything's in place now for it to actually have a grand opening this spring.
That's exciting.
But I don't know that the Scenic Bikeways Committee per se had anything to do with it, because like I said, Cycle Oregon sort of took over that function. So.
Well, I
I
appreciate
know
the.
there is sort of a de facto scenic bikeways committee still, but it's it's really sort of a non-functional committee.
Yeah, I mean,
Unfortunately.
that's something we may. I think maybe there's a broader discussion about sort of the health of our external committees. I don't see tons of value in us being involved in committees that we don't feel are activating, stimulating, encouraging us. And so I don't think there needs to be any decision made today, but just based on that, it's maybe something for OBPAC to consider in the future.
Yeah, OBPAC was a really great committee to be on pre-pandemic, and then you know, when that's been quite a few years now, but they cut staffing at the Parks Department, and you know, and they've restored some of it, but we have not had a committee meeting. So.
Yeah, well then, I think, part of our agenda for this item or sort of work around this topic area was to have official appointments, made for committees. But I am feeling, and this I would also encourage Dave, if you're available, to join in on this conversation, but it seems like there really does, regardless of sort of the immediacy of upcoming committee meetings, it sounds like there may need to be a broader conversation about our external participation on committees. And I don't know what the official sort of legal requirement is in regards to OBPAC members serving on these, but for the health of our committee, which I feel like we're as healthy as we've ever been, at least in my tenure. And so making sure that we're investing, energy into ourselves, really, and just getting clarity on sort of the status of other groups, I think is really important. Yes, whoever, Dave, Mavis, anyone,
I was
please.
just, I think that's a great note. I think that the work that they're doing with their paperwork cleansing and then figuring about I think ODOT is on this. This is one of those things that we need to keep pushing because it came up with the MAC. It's that whole thing where they have all these committees and they're not. And I believe like the first or the second thing on our agenda was to tell us to be patient just a little bit longer, that they're still figuring it out. And we shouldn't let them get off the hook, but they did address it first thing.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And so I don't feel necessarily comfortable making new appointments unless someone indicates that they are very excited about serving.
I think in general, it's a volunteer thing, so I don't think we can appoint people who aren't really interested in serving.
Perfect.
But yeah, no, I agree with you, Andre. I mean, if we have people who are, the fact that the committees that Dell are on aren't meeting, it's not causing overhead for us. I mean, Dell's not having to do anything because there's no meetings. So there's not much to be saved by saying, hey, we're not going to participate anymore. I think it's more of a case if there's committees where it just seems like our participation isn't appropriate or isn't helping or isn't helping us, that we should definitely talk about whether we want to do that or not.
Totally. Ian, please.
I just wanted to chime into one of the issues you raised a little earlier, Andre, which was the question around legal requirements. So there are other committees like SRAG or Scenic Byways, I believe, is one of them, where the membership composition, whether in statute or in rule, says includes a member of the Oregon Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And so their membership spells out that one of you is entitled to sit on that that committee. Now, that means that one of you is entitled to sit there and that one of you can be appointed to that. That doesn't compel you to do that. So if nobody wants to do it, you will continue to be invited and provided that opportunity. But if, none of you have bandwidth or, whatever the circumstances, the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department has no legal authority to, pick you up at your house and drag you to a meeting if that was a concern. I suspect it wasn't a concern, but I just wanted to state that for the record. So
thank you for that clarity.
I might add that I was actually on ORTAC before I was on this committee, and the way I got on this committee was as a representative of ORTAC. And Robert was originally the ORTAC representative on OBPAC, and when he stepped down, he appointed me to replace him, and so that's how I'm here. So it wasn't the other way around. And I am quite disappointed that ORTAC hasn't been more active recently. When the first few years I was on it, we were very active. We met regularly. We did several field trips every year, and I miss that. I wish they could get back to that, but I don't know what the reason is. They just haven't. So anyway,
yeah, that's a really good point, Del, because if you decided to retire from this committee, there's nobody to appoint your replacement.
Yeah.
and basically, I believe that's written into our enabling legislation that's how that seat is filled. So, I mean, we could potentially end up with a seat that we can't put anybody in, it sounds like. So well, don't retire is the thing there.
Well, we still have a committee in name only, but we just haven't met. If you look at the website, it still lists us all on there. It hasn't been updated for years. I think we're possibly past term limits, but we're still listed on there. So, I don't know what's happening.
So yeah, I think this all reiterates the necessity for some dedicated time on a agenda in the future to just sort of talk through it, just holding space to really talk through it. Yes, Kathy, please.
So I know time's going, but I just wanted to update everybody. So I'm on the UAC committee and I love it. We've had our first meeting and there was a lot of just.
Kathy, can you remind us what the acronym is, please?
Sure, yes, Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee. So it's a newer committee. There are 3 of us. I was the first new person outside of an ODOT person. They made a request to this committee to seat someone from this committee there. So I'm that person. I'm the first one they've approved. And so they used me to kind of help create the process for inviting others to join. It will be a 15-person committee. Just the process has been wonderful. The folks engaged in it, and I'm not going to remember anybody's name right now. I was trying to frantically find my notes because we covered so much. Like there's, accessibility resources, ODOT resources. We went through, we had like we had an 8-item agenda. It was a lot of information. My head is still a little bit spinning. They had a call, they needed some assistance for, they did sort of like a videotape project. It was an ODOT project wanting participants using the systems and using some new interaction with some metro systems. And it was about a 4-hour ask. That happened in April. And so it happened before we met again, but it was fun, and it was fun to see the videos. It got some airplay on TV, on the news about how, ODOT's being responsive to accessibility needs. So I've enjoyed the committee. We haven't done much. The plan is to only meet 3 times a year, which is great. It doesn't seem like a heavy lift, although each time we meet, I think we cover a lot. What I love about it is it feels like ODOT is super responsive in this area, or at least they're making space for it. As I've mentioned before in this committee, there is so many poor transportation factors. I don't know how to word this exactly, but there is a lot of poor transportation happening for workforce, for accessibility, for just the use of the current system. Our city in particular keeps wanting to apply for other studies and other methods of transportation just because the transportation we have is so poor and lacking. And you know, that seems to go into the void a lot of times when it's said, but the ODOT representative, and I'm sorry, I don't have their name, I'll have it the next time, super responsive and taking like a ton of that information back to ODOT about, you know, what it is, what the barriers are, what exactly the issues are. And, you know, I'm working on trying to get more data, and I'm having other people who are having my similar experience, which is there's no buses, there's no seats available, there's no even bus signs out here to tell you where to catch a bus. And so those kinds of things, they seem very responsive to it in this committee. So I'm enjoying it immensely. Hope to be able to tell you more. We're right now just in the formulation. Like I said, they're just using me right now to kind of help streamline the documentation and the process for getting somebody onboarded. And they'll be launching their campaign to get their full 15 seats filled, I guess, in the next couple of months.
Amazing. Thank you, Kathy. It was so exciting to hear about that, and thanks for your service. I wanted to open the floor for Emma, please.
Thank you. Hearing Kathy, I'm really excited about that. And my brain goes to, well, does it just take a lawsuit? Maybe that's the answer in the US context. All we have to do is sue the agency, and then there's lots of resources dedicated. One look at it. Anyway, updating on the Jurisdictional Transfer Advisory Committee. We are scheduled to meet tentatively on May 14th next. And so this is the committee that makes or solicits applications from communities, makes a recommendation to the state legislature, which is in session right now. The legislature is looking at the recommendation. And then in May, we're looking to meet and receive any relevant updates from this current legislative session. And then get ready. We're not going to do any recommendations this year because it's an every other year cycle. But still kind of queuing up and getting ready to have quality applications come in 2026 and figure out what we've learned from this first go around in the process. So good to have some activity. That's where things are at with that committee. Just a brief update, and should know more after the likely May meeting. And then side note for the broader discussion that Andre was suggesting around OBPAC appointments to committees and what committees are we representing and how are we involved more broadly. I believe that someone, Kim Curley from Commute Options in Bend, who's great. I think she's serving on the Mobility Advisory Committee, and I think she may be serving in either the bicycle or the pedestrian representative position, which OBPAC has put a lot of time and energy into over the years. Provided comments. Some of those comments were OBPAC should be the entity to appoint the bicycle representative and the pedestrian representative. And our last response to ODOT staff when they said, hey, OBPAC, how about some more appointees when our previous representative stepped down, was please clean up your committee processes and make it worth our while to participate, then come back to us and we'll appoint someone. So I'm not really sure what happened in that process, but it seems like there might have been some sort of sideways appointment and selection. But it just kind of seems like a perpetuation of comments being asked for and then ignored or rejected. So don't know what's going on, just a note.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's helpful or not. I can provide a little bit more information about the MAC and how people get on the MAC. And I feel like there was a miscommunication between the MAC and OBPAC that was not intentional or malicious, but I can provide more information about that if folks want it now, or I can write an email and
I'm fine if you just want to say.
Okay, I'll do high level. Emma, please feel free to tag me in with any additional questions. So this is my understanding, is that there is no process for getting on the MAC. All you have to do is email the MAC organizers and they put you on the MAC. So like there's not really an appointment process. I think their understanding was that they were asking OBPAC to help recruit a ped and bike member because they didn't have one. And that OBPAC recruited and then it didn't work. And so then OBPAC was like, we don't want to recruit anymore. We don't want to put anybody in that position. Meanwhile, Kim Curley emailed and asked if she could get on the committee. And they said yes, because they don't have a process. All you need to do is email them and you can be on the MAC. And has that pedestrian and bicycle background. So there, I think that there was a miscommunication around appointing, because as far as I can tell, there's no process for how someone gets onto the MAC, and if you email them, they will happily let you be a MAC member. That's my understanding. And so I think that there was like a miscommunication in there somewhere, which I think is real, but I just wanted to sort of, I don't think that they're trying. Anyway, I will stop there, quit making up excuses for things. But Emma, do you have any questions about that? And I also wasn't there when that MAC OBPAC interaction was happening, so there could have just really been people said things that and I wasn't there to hear them.
That sounds very plausible, and I appreciate that update. And it makes me think, okay, instead of spending hundreds of hours weighing in on our process and providing comments and trying to have a clear charter for the MAC, maybe our next strategy as a committee is that we try to get more people onto the MAC. And because we had to fight to get a pedestrian representative and a bike representative that is laid out in the rules. But then when we had Nick Meltzer and Bob Junduff serving in those capacities, they felt like two voices on a committee that is much, much larger than that was just not getting, it wasn't worth it. And so one potential strategy, if the OBPAC chooses to engage further with the MAC, would be to have, say, 8 people or 10 people, whatever would be roughly comparable or more than the trucking industry representation, and say, hey, we really do want to have people. It could be moms with strollers, people with accessibility devices, different types of people who ride bikes, a whole range of different folks serve on the MAC by just emailing staff and saying, hey, all of us want to be on this committee. Let's balance things out and actually have it be a mobility and safety oriented committee, not a freight industry committee that seems to have a lot of power and sway. Food for thought. I don't know.
Makes sense to me. Oh, go ahead.
Is the MAC like a government? I assume it's set up different because we were all had to be appointed by the governor. Is it how? I'm not really like, I wasn't there for the whole MAC beef or like what happened with that, but I knew that they got really powerful and it felt weird. And what is like the background of what happened? Because I've never really heard the whole thing.
It could take quite a while. I think if we drive to Bend together for the July meeting, we should chat about that if you want to. But the short story, as I read it, is that the freight industry in Oregon has gained power over the past decades and has positioned themselves to have a committee that continues to maintain power in reviewing projects and having a lot of say over what ODOT does, even though it technically is an advisory committee. When we started looking into it, it seemed like it was a decision-making committee, not an advisory committee.
Okay.
And so there's been some improvement, but the backstory is power dynamics and freight industry.
Okay, I was just confused because like, I don't know, I would think that I knew that they had those decision-making things, but I was like, why would that happen for a not government appointed committee when I feel like ours isn't really that decision based? It's more of like advisory. So, okay, yeah.
Those are exactly the questions of why does the governor appointed committee have less power than we don't know how we appoint people, email us and you might get on the committee.
Mm-hmm. Did you have something, Ian?
Yeah, I'm happy to reach out to the ODOT staff who staff the Mobility Advisory Committee, and maybe they could, if you all are interested, come and present to OPAC about the MAC. As what I'm hearing, it might be worthwhile to have a primer, like a mobility 101, so we're all on the same page on what the MAC is and does. And then from there, we could perhaps continue the discussion, if that's a useful way to approach this.
I don't think the issue is that I have is all about like what they do. I mean, I guess maybe that is, yeah, maybe that could be helpful. I don't know.
If you all don't think it's helpful, I won't do it.
I don't think I understand what the power dynamic is, and I guess we're opposed. Being new, there's probably a dynamic I don't understand. And if the issue is that they have a power dynamic that we're either envious of or trying to duplicate or trying to take down, I guess that might need to be explained before we meet with the MAC to kind of wrap our heads around what is our relationship to the MAC. And if we do want to be on there, I don't know that we want to be on there to be contentious, or if we're trying to just simply ask ODOT, which we have some ODOT folks here, to say, can that power dynamic change in some way?
I think this is going, they addressed it like second thing in today. They said they are stepping away from the organization of their committees themselves and needing to focus on their paperwork and getting all their paper figured out before thinking they can cohesively come up with how to control all their different committees. Because I think they have more than they can take care of.
Are you saying ODOT? Or are you saying
ODOT?
Okay.
ODOT,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of like we're talking about the MAC committee because it was making it so that projects were not being completed, like the road diets and things like that, because there were some people within the MAC that were like, we don't want this to happen, and therefore it was not happening. So yeah, there was a power dynamic that was very, very strong against what we wanted to do, which was put in bicycle facilities. No, I don't think that we should step away from this fight. Yes, we do need to keep pushing it. I don't know if having the MAC come and present to us when they haven't actually done anything to, like, they had an audit, they had 3 or 4 things that they had to do, and they haven't done them. That is the problem. Emma, go ahead. You're better at this.
No, I think you're spot on. And I think one question is, does OBPAC want to put more energy into this or not? If OBPAC does want to engage, and if there's going to be a presentation, I think that presentation should focus on what changes have been made, because we've already put a lot of time and energy into this and not seeing much change. The latest state of the situation, from my perspective, was we met with 3 directors pretty high up in the ODOT agency, and they said, we have this plan. Here's some short-term actions we're going to take. Here's some long-term actions we're going to take. Then, once again, which has happened multiple times in the process, legislative session came around. They said, oh, we don't have capacity to deal with this. We're not fulfilling our promise. Maybe we talk to you in June after the legislative session is done. And so the priorities have shifted again, and 2 out of 3 of the directors who we met with don't even work at ODOT anymore. So with the staff changes, there's additional challenges. And I don't think that this situation's gonna budge much without internal ODOT director leadership saying, yes, we see the problem, and yes, we're gonna change it. I feel like we got to that point with statements being made by those directors. But since most of them have left the agency and there's a lot of change and other uncertainty right now, I don't know if it's super ripe for effective change in this moment. My 2 cents.
Yeah, Mavis, when you said that topic 2, they said they're going to step back and focus on their paperwork, except for, I know that my city just had to do a presentation to the MAC. They were on the MAC agenda in March. You know, I'm not part of that project, so I don't know how that impacted the city, but if ODOT's saying they're not focusing on that, but they're still taking things to them, that's very confusing. That's a confusing message. It's saying they're stepping back from, and again, ODOT has to resolve its own power dynamic, and then tell us what that should be, and our involvement in participating in another group, whether or not they've agreed to let it have whatever power it has or not agreed to that. That's, I guess, something that has to be resolved with ODOT. What I would like to have is if ODOT folks, not the MAC as a committee, but of ODOT folks in charge now, I get that that's been changed, will tell us what that is and what we as representatives of communities that have to have projects go before the MAC, what we can expect is a result, or is the power dynamic, or will be the delay in our projects. It would be helpful for us to take that back to people we respond to, me as being part of a city, to say, this is what we can expect when we go in front of MAC.
I think that we should, at our in-person meeting, we need to have a side conversation, not necessarily in a meeting format, and hash through like a plan, because this is something, it is a power dynamic within ODOT itself. We have been trying to adjust to address it for multiple years now. Like, there's a reason you guys don't know what Emma and I are talking about, and it is that we've been working on it for years, literally. And we are getting, well, today we were told they're putting on the side again because they have to get their paperwork figured out before they can figure out how to run the meeting. So, okay, when are we gonna actually get the results that of a power dynamic switch, or just being, it's not just being at the table, it's being listened to while you're at the table. That's why the people that we did send stepped down, because they were just there listening, and the whatever they said wasn't taken into consideration. They didn't figure that their time was being well used. So I think that this is something that we should definitely not lose sight of, but we need to have a more cohesive plan that's not made up on the fly like this. And Mr. Davison, this would be a great strategy thing for you to kind of think through, because you know more than us. I run a bike shop. I know a lot about my bike shop. I know very little about how all these committees work together. And yes, you're coming to me for information, and we've been telling you repeatedly that this is a problem. Not you particularly, sorry. Just, we've been saying this is not a good thing, and we keep getting sidelined. So yeah, make us powerful, put us in the right spot so that we can do good work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Very glad I'm there.
Appreciate this is a sensitive and dynamic and historically rooted conversation. So I think it makes it hard for even OBPAC as a whole to really converse about it, because we're not all on the same page. And so I do see potential value in some sort of introductory presentation, perhaps, of the MAC and sort of the organization of it, right? It's like, how is it organized? How are members appointed? What is the scope of their power? And what is the historic relationship between OBPAC and the MAC? Potentially to sort of ground us all at a certain level. That could also be just us doing research on sort of their webpage. But I think, yeah, let's plan to have some conversations in July about sort of next steps around this, so that we can be organized and decide if we're going to push forward collectively. We're going to send off individuals to go and represent on our behalf. But I think it's an important conversation, and appreciate Emma specifically for carrying it through sort of all these phases of OBPAC as well.
And Mavis, she started
And,
it.
oh, well, thank
I'm
you
gonna
both.
give her
Yeah,
credit
sorry.
she went to a meeting and she's like, wait, there's no legal sound reason why we wouldn't stripe bike lanes. Actually, the rules say that striping on the street is fine for freight routes that have to maintain the hole in the air. And then she was like, oh, I'm totally being ignored. It's like the bike person in the room doesn't even matter. So that's where this whole thing started years ago.
Yeah.
Go, Mavis.
Appreciate that. And I think, you know, we all, as OBPAC members, likely share the vision that the bike and ped folks have been ignored for too much of sort of modern history, and we want our voices heard, and we want our views reflected at least equally, but in a perfect universe, proportionately to the ways in which we've been excluded to sort of make up for lost time. And so if strategizing around the MAC is how we get there, then let's do that. But yeah, we made it to our last agenda item, and I just wanted to say thank you to all the OBPAC members, all the ODOT staff, and the guests in the room today. We're sort of hitting an unprecedented time in U.S. history, and I know that it's been very hard for me to keep my head on straight as I do my public service work or just sort of exist day to day. And I just want to reiterate my thanks and appreciation for all your dedication to this critically important work. I think when I come to realize that I'm working in a field or working with folks that a certain regime is so against, it means I know that I'm doing the right stuff. And so just want you all to feel, despite what certain people might say about pedestrians and bicyclists and community investment and equity, it is all very important. And I just want to thank you all for your dedication to serving the state and serving your communities. And I'm so honored to meet with you and look forward to seeing you all in person in July. And with that note, I believe the meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, Andre.
Thank you.
Great job.